The instructors at Naval Special Warfare Command had seen thousands of candidates attempt SEAL training. They'd watched elite athletes, seasoned Marines, and battle-hardened soldiers push themselves to their absolute limits. But they'd never seen anything like what happened on that scorching Tuesday morning in Coronado when Bethany Garcia crossed the finish line of Hell Week with a time that shattered every record in the program's history. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this, don't miss out. Subscribe now for more. What made it even more shocking wasn't just that she completed the most grueling military training in the world. It was that 3 months earlier, every single evaluator had predicted she'd wash out in the first week. They said her emotional nature would break her. They said a European woman had no place in America's most elite fighting force. They were about to learn just how wrong they could be. The sun cast long shadows across the pristine beaches of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, as the morning briefing began at 05:30 hours. The training facility hummed with its usual pre-dawn intensity, instructors reviewing candidate files, medical staff preparing for another day of injuries, and support personnel coordinating the complex logistics that kept the world's most demanding military program operational. SEAL training had remained unchanged in its fundamental brutality for decades. The Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL program was designed to break the human spirit, to separate those who merely wanted to be elite warriors from those who would die before they quit. The statistics were merciless. Historically, only 20 to 25% of candidates successfully completed the entire program. The rest were eliminated through injury, voluntary withdrawal, or simply being broken by the relentless physical and psychological pressure. The training compound itself reflected this unforgiving philosophy. Every structure, every obstacle, every piece of equipment was designed to test human limitations. The infamous obstacle course that had humbled Olympic athletes, the frigid Pacific waters where hypothermia was a constant threat, the muddy training pits where candidates learned that comfort was a luxury they could no longer afford. This was a place where dreams came to die, where the strongest men in America discovered they weren't strong enough. In recent years, the program had begun accepting female candidates following policy changes, but the results had been predictably brutal. The physical standards remained unchanged, the mental pressure unrelenting. The few women who had attempted the program faced not only the standard impossibility of SEAL training, but also the additional burden of proving that gender integration wasn't a mistake. The instructors, while professional, harbored deep skepticism about whether any woman could meet the demands of a program specifically designed to exceed male physical and mental limits. The morning air carried the sound of surf pounding against the beach, a constant reminder of the element that would test every candidate's relationship with fear, cold, and the basic human instinct for survival. Today, like every day, new candidates would discover that wanting to be a SEAL and being capable of becoming one were separated by an ocean of pain that most people couldn't imagine, let alone endure. Command Master Chief Rodriguez stood in the briefing room reviewing the files of the newest class of candidates. 28 men and 2 women would begin the program today, though he knew from experience that fewer than 8 would still be standing in 6 months. The attrition rate was brutal by design. SEAL teams couldn't afford to deploy operators who might break under pressure when lives depended on their reliability. The facility's reputation preceded it globally. Military personnel from allied nations spoke of BUDS with a mixture of respect and terror. It wasn't just training. It was a systematic deconstruction and reconstruction of human capability. Candidates entered as accomplished military personnel and either emerged as something approaching superhuman or were eliminated in the attempt. There was no middle ground, no partial completion, no participation trophy. You either became a SEAL or you didn't, and the program would determine which category you belonged to with clinical precision. Bethany Garcia stood at attention among her fellow candidates, her 5'6" frame appearing almost delicate next to the towering figures surrounding her. At 23, she carried herself with the precise bearing of someone who would spend years proving herself in environments where she didn't quite belong. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her uniform was immaculate. But what set her apart wasn't visible in her appearance. It was the intensity that radiated from her olive green eyes, a focus that seemed to burn with quiet determination. Born in Valencia, Spain, Bethany had immigrated to the United States with her family when she was 12. Her father, Miguel Garcia, had been a Spanish Naval Special Operations veteran who instilled in his daughter a respect for military excellence that bordered on obsession. Her mother, Elena, was a former competitive swimmer who taught Bethany that physical limitations existed primarily in the mind. Growing up bilingual in a military household had given Bethany a unique perspective on discipline, sacrifice, and the difference between wanting something and being willing to pay the price to achieve it. Her path to SEAL training had been unconventional. After completing her undergraduate degree in international relations at Georgetown University, Bethany had enlisted in the Navy rather than pursuing the officer track her grades could have guaranteed. She wanted to prove herself from the ground up, to earn respect through performance rather than education or family connections. Her European background made her an anomaly in American military circles, cultured, multilingual, and possessing a philosophical approach to warfare that differed from the more direct American mindset. During her initial Navy training, Bethany had distinguished herself through an unusual combination of intellectual rigor and physical capability. She approached every challenge like a puzzle to be solved, rather than an obstacle to be overcome through brute force. Her instructors noted her tendency to study manuals with the intensity of a scholar, often staying up late analyzing techniques and strategies that other sailors learned through repetition and muscle memory. She didn't just want to meet standards, she wanted to understand the principles behind them. What truly set Bethany apart was her emotional intelligence, though this would later be mischaracterized as a weakness by those who didn't understand her approach. She felt deeply, the satisfaction of achievement, the sting of criticism, the weight of responsibility. Rather than suppressing these emotions, she had learned to channel them into fuel for improvement. When other candidates saw setbacks as defeats, Bethany saw them as data points in her ongoing analysis of how to optimize performance. Her decision to attempt SEAL training had shocked her Navy peers. She was already successful in her intelligence specialist role, had received commendations for her analytical work, and was being groomed for advanced responsibilities that would have guaranteed a comfortable military career. But comfort wasn't what Bethany sought. She had grown up hearing her father's stories about Spanish special operations, about the brotherhood forged through shared impossibility, about the unique satisfaction of knowing you could accomplish things that others believed were beyond human capability. The night before training began, Bethany had called her parents from her barracks room. Her father's voice carried both pride and concern. Pride that his daughter was attempting the most challenging military training in the world. Concern that the American SEAL program might not be ready for someone like her. Her mother had been more direct. "Mija, they will try to break you, but we didn't raise you to be breakable." Those words echoed in Bethany's mind as she stood in formation, surrounded by candidates who had no idea what she was truly capable of achieving. The first indication that Bethany would face unique challenges came during the initial medical evaluation. Dr. Sarah Chen, the program's chief medical officer, reviewed Bethany's psychological profile with barely concealed skepticism. The assessment noted Bethany's heightened emotional responsiveness and tendency toward introspective analysis during stress situations. In the clinical language of military psychology, these were polite ways of saying she felt things too deeply and thought too much under pressure. "Garcia," Dr. Chen said, tapping her pen against the clipboard, "your physical scores are adequate, but I'm concerned about your psychological resilience markers. SEAL training isn't just about physical endurance, it's about emotional shutdown under extreme stress. Your profile suggests you process emotions rather than compartmentalize them." The implication was clear. Bethany's European emotional openness, the very trait that made her effective in intelligence work, was seen as a fundamental incompatibility with SEAL culture. The instructors shared similar concerns during their pre-training assessment meetings. Instructor Williams, a 20-year veteran who had overseen hundreds of SEAL candidates, was particularly vocal about his reservations. Look at her psychological markers. She's too introspective, too emotionally engaged. When candidates start thinking about their feelings instead of just pushing through, that's when they ring the bell. We can't afford to waste training resources on someone who's going to wash out the moment things get uncomfortable. Master Chief Rodriguez, while more diplomatic, harbored his own doubts. Garcia's test scores are impressive, he acknowledged, but SEAL training isn't an academic exercise. It's about turning off the part of your brain that questions orders and just executing under impossible circumstances. Her intelligence specialist background shows she's used to analyzing problems, not just surviving them. That kind of thinking can be dangerous when you need instant, unquestioning response to commands. The barrier wasn't just institutional skepticism, it was a fundamental philosophical clash. SEAL training had been designed around a specific model of masculine stoicism: suppress emotion, ignore pain, follow orders without hesitation. Bethany's approach of emotional integration and analytical problem-solving was seen not just as different, but as fundamentally incompatible with the program's core methodology. The instructors weren't being malicious, they genuinely believed they were protecting her from inevitable failure. During her first week of pre-training orientation, Bethany overheard conversations that confirmed her worst fears about how she was perceived. The European girl won't make it past the first water revolution, one instructor predicted to another. Too much thinking, not enough doing. Plus, she's got that emotional thing going on. The moment she starts crying, she's done. These weren't cruel taunts. They were professional assessments from men who had dedicated their careers to identifying who could and couldn't become a SEAL. The most damaging limitation wasn't what others said about her. It was the systematic way her strengths were reframed as weaknesses. Her linguistic abilities were dismissed as irrelevant to combat operations. Her analytical approach was characterized as overthinking. Her emotional awareness was labeled as instability. Every trait that had made her successful in previous military roles was suddenly viewed as a liability in the SEAL program. Even her fellow candidates, while not openly hostile, maintained a careful distance. They'd all sacrificed enormously to earn their spots in the program, and most harbored private doubts about whether the inclusion of female candidates would compromise the standards they respected. Bethany found herself isolated not through malice, but through the collective assumption that her eventual departure was inevitable. Why invest in relationships with someone who wouldn't be around long enough for them to matter? The psychological weight of these expectations created a unique burden. Bethany wasn't just fighting to prove herself. She was fighting to prove that the entire premise of female integration wasn't a mistake. Every struggle would be scrutinized as evidence of gender-based limitations. Every moment of doubt would be seized upon as confirmation that women couldn't handle SEAL training. She carried not just her own dreams, but the future opportunities of every woman who might follow in her footsteps. The pattern of exclusion began subtly during the first weeks of preparatory training. While male candidates were grouped together for informal study sessions and strategy discussions, Bethany found herself consistently left out of these gatherings. It wasn't malicious. The other candidates simply didn't think to include her in their brotherhood-building activities. They discussed training techniques, shared tips from their research, and formed the early bonds that would sustain them through the brutal months ahead, while Bethany remained on the periphery of these crucial support networks. During physical training sessions, the instructor's attention distribution revealed an unconscious bias that became increasingly obvious. When male candidates struggled with exercises, instructors provided detailed feedback and modification suggestions. When Bethany encountered difficulties, the guidance was more perfunctory, as if the instructors were going through the motions rather than investing in her improvement. The message was subtle but clear. Her success wasn't expected, so extensive coaching wasn't warranted. The most telling exclusion occurred during tactical planning exercises. These sessions were designed to assess candidates' ability to think strategically under pressure, exactly the kind of challenge where Bethany's analytical background should have been an asset. Instead, team leaders consistently assigned her to support roles, communications, logistics, equipment management, while giving the primary leadership responsibilities to male candidates with less strategic training. When she attempted to contribute tactical suggestions, they were politely acknowledged and then ignored. Garcia's focus on the radio protocols became a common refrain during these exercises. Let Williams handle the assault planning. The assumption was that her value lay in technical support rather than strategic thinking, despite her intelligent specialist background providing her with more tactical analysis experience than most of her peers possessed. Her insights about terrain assessment and risk evaluation were dismissed as academic theorizing rather than practical military knowledge. The exclusion extended to social dynamics within the training cohort. Evening discussions about military history, combat tactics, and special operations lore happened around her rather than with her. The other candidates weren't being deliberately cruel, they simply couldn't envision her as a future teammate in combat situations. Their conversations about hypothetical deployments and mission planning naturally excluded her because they couldn't imagine scenarios where she would be present for such operations. Instructor feedback sessions revealed the most systematic pattern of exclusion. While male candidates received detailed performance analyses that included both strengths and areas for improvement, Bethany's evaluations focused primarily on her limitations. Needs to develop more explosive power in obstacle navigation. Should work on emotional regulation during stress scenarios. Must improve confidence in leadership situations. The feedback was technically accurate, but revealed an evaluation framework that assumed deficiency rather than potential. During mock vision planning, Bethany's suggestions were consistently attributed to her academic background rather than her military instincts. When she identified potential security vulnerabilities in proposed operations, instructors would comment, "Good academic analysis, Garcia," rather than recognizing it as tactical acumen. Her contributions were intellectualized and therefore diminished, as if strategic thinking was somehow less valuable than intuitive aggression in special operations contexts. The most frustrating exclusion occurred during informal mentorship opportunities. Senior instructors routinely pulled aside promising male candidates for private coaching sessions, sharing insights from their operational experience and providing guidance that went beyond formal curriculum requirements. Bethany never received these informal tutorials, not because she was performing poorly, but because the instructors couldn't envision her benefiting from advanced operational wisdom. Why invest extra time in someone who probably wouldn't complete the program? Even medical evaluations reflected this pattern. When male candidates reported injuries or fatigue, medical staff worked collaboratively to develop treatment plans that would keep them in training. When Bethany experienced similar issues, the default recommendation was often rest or withdrawal, rather than creative solutions to maintain her participation. The medical team unconsciously assumed that her body couldn't adapt to training demands the way male physiology could. The exclusion created a self-reinforcing cycle of doubt. As Bethany found herself increasingly isolated from the informal learning networks that sustained other candidates, her performance began to reflect the lack of collaborative support. She was fighting not just the designed brutality of SEAL training, but also the additional burden of doing it without the peer support systems that other candidates took for granted. Every struggle was interpreted as evidence that the exclusion had been justified, rather than recognition that isolation itself was sabotaging her potential for success. What none of the instructors knew was that Bethany had begun preparing for SEAL training 18 months before she ever set foot in Coronado. While her peers were enjoying their off-duty time, Bethany had quietly constructed the most comprehensive preparation program any candidate had ever undertaken. Her approach wasn't just about physical conditioning, it was a systematic analysis of every aspect of SEAL training, broken down into components she could master through dedicated study and practice. Her preparation began with acquiring every publicly available document about BUDS training methodology. She studied declassified training manuals, analyzed published accounts from former SEALs, and even conducted informational interviews with retired special operations personnel who were willing to share insights about the psychological demands of the program. Bethany approached SEAL preparation like a doctoral dissertation, creating detailed files on everything from hypothermia management to the psychological techniques used to break candidates during Hell Week. The physical preparation was equally systematic. Rather than simply following standard fitness routines, Bethany hired a former Navy SEAL turned personal trainer who helped her develop exercise protocols specifically designed to replicate training stresses. She spent hours in cold water, gradually extending her tolerance until she could maintain focus and motor function in near hypothermic conditions. Her swimming wasn't just about speed and endurance. She practiced complex navigation tasks while exhausted, simulating the cognitive demands of water operations under extreme fatigue. Her psychological preparation was perhaps the most sophisticated element of her training regimen. Bethany had researched the specific stress inoculation techniques used in special operations training and developed her own mental conditioning program. She practiced meditation and visualization exercises designed to maintain emotional equilibrium under extreme pressure. Unlike other candidates who hoped to simply endure whatever the instructors threw at them, Bethany had systematically prepared responses to specific psychological manipulation tactics she knew would be employed. The most innovative aspect of her preparation involved language and cultural research. Bethany had identified that many SEAL operations required interaction with foreign populations, and she had spent months studying Arabic, Pashto, and Farsi to supplement her existing Spanish and English fluency. She also researched Middle Eastern and Central Asian cultural protocols, understanding that her European background might actually provide unique advantages in certain operational contexts that the instructors hadn't considered. Her equipment preparation was equally thorough. She had acquired and practiced with every piece of gear used in SEAL training, often purchasing military surplus items to ensure familiarity with the exact tools she would encounter. She practiced knot tying until she could complete complex rigging tasks blindfolded. She studied weapon systems beyond the basic familiarity required for entry, understanding that tactical proficiency might compensate for any perceived physical limitations during weapons-based evaluations. Perhaps most importantly, she had prepared for social and psychological isolation she knew she would face. She had practiced training scenarios in complete isolation, deliberately removing social support to simulate the exclusions he anticipated experiencing. She developed internal motivation techniques that didn't rely on peer encouragement or instructor approval, knowing that she would need to sustain herself through periods when external validation would be non-existent. Her research had also revealed specific areas where female physiology might actually provide advantages in SEAL operations. Women's generally higher body fat percentage offered better insulation during cold water operations. Female candidates often demonstrated superior fine motor control under stress, which could be advantageous for technical tasks under extreme fatigue. Bethany had identified these physiological benefits and developed training protocols to maximize them, turning perceived weaknesses into potential strengths. The depth of her preparation extended to studying the individual instructors she would encounter. Through careful research of public records and social media, Bethany had identified the backgrounds, specialties, and likely psychological approaches of key training personnel. She understood their military histories, their training philosophies, and the specific triggers that might influence their evaluation of her performance. This wasn't manipulation. It was strategic preparation for a psychological battlefield where understanding your evaluators could mean the difference between success and failure. Most significantly, she had prepared for failure scenarios. She had developed contingency plans for different types of setbacks, from injury management to psychological crisis responses. While other candidates entered training hoping nothing would go wrong, Bethany had systematically prepared for when things inevitably would go wrong, ensuring that temporary setbacks wouldn't become permanent defeats. Her preparation wasn't just about succeeding, it was about succeeding despite obstacles that others might find unsurmountable. By the fourth week of preparatory training, whispers about Bethany's commitment began circulating through the instructor staff with increasing frequency. Her methodical approach to every exercise, her detailed note-taking after each session, and her tendency to stay after hours practicing techniques had caught the attention of personnel who were trained to identify potential problems before they became larger issues. What should have been viewed as exceptional dedication was instead being interpreted as concerning behavior that required monitoring. The first formal meeting about Bethany took place in Master Chief Rodriguez's office on a Tuesday morning. Present were the 3 primary instructors who would oversee the candidates through Hell Week, along with Dr. Chen from the medical staff and Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the Program Administration Office. The topic was ostensibly routine candidate evaluation, but everyone in the room understood that Bethany Garcia had become a special case requiring special attention. Her preparation is extensive, Dr. Chen began, consulting her notes from recent psychological evaluations. Perhaps too extensive. She's treating this like an academic exercise rather than military training. The level of analysis she applies to every aspect of the program suggests someone who doesn't trust the training methodology itself. That kind of intellectual distance from the program can be problematic when we need immediate, unquestioning response to commands. Instructor Williams nodded grimly. She's been asking questions about training rationale that go beyond curiosity. Yesterday, she wanted to know why specific obstacles were positioned in particular sequences, as if she was trying to reverse engineer our psychological manipulation techniques. That's not the mindset of someone who's here to be trained. That's the mindset of someone who thinks she can outsmart the program. The concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Bethany's analytical approach did represent a challenge to the training philosophy that demanded candidates surrender their individual thinking in favor of collective action. Her European educational background had taught her to question methodologies and seek understanding of underlying principles, while SEAL training required faith in processes that weren't always explicable to the people experiencing them. This fundamental philosophical conflict was creating tension that rippled through every aspect of her evaluation. Lieutenant Commander Hayes raised a more serious concern. We've received inquiries from some of the male candidates about Garcia's intensity. They're not complaining exactly, but several have commented that her preparation level is making them question whether they're adequately prepared themselves. That kind of psychological pressure on the cohort could be disruptive to group dynamics during the more challenging phases of training. Master Chief Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, weighing the implications. The question is whether we're looking at someone who's exceptionally prepared or someone who's using preparation as a way to avoid confronting the reality that she might not be suited for this program. Sometimes candidates who over-prepare are the ones who break hardest when preparation isn't enough and they have to rely on pure determination. The medical evaluation added another layer of complexity. Dr. Chen had noted that Bethany's stress response patterns were unusual for SEAL candidates. Rather than the typical fight-or-flight reactions, she demonstrated what the psychological literature termed tend and befriend responses, seeking to understand and adapt to stressful situations rather than simply powering through them. While this might be advantageous in certain operational contexts, it was viewed as potentially problematic for the specific demands of BUD's training. Her physiological responses to stress are concerning, Dr. Chen continued. She shows elevated cortisol levels, but not in the pattern we expect from successful candidates. Instead of the brief spikes followed by rapid recovery that indicate good stress management, she maintains elevated levels while continuing to function analytically. It's almost as if she's using intellectual processes to override natural stress responses, which could be unsustainable during extended high-stress periods. The stakes escalated further when word of these concerns reached the upper levels of Naval Special Warfare Command. The integration of female candidates into SEAL training was still politically sensitive, and any indication that the program might not be suitable for women could have implications far beyond Bethany's individual case. Senior leadership needed assurance that if female candidates were going to be eliminated from the program, it would be based on legitimate performance issues rather than institutional bias. This political dimension added pressure on the instructors to be extraordinarily careful in their evaluation of Bethany's performance. Every comment, every assessment, every decision about her training would potentially be scrutinized by oversight committees and advocacy groups. The instructors found themselves in the uncomfortable position of needing to be simultaneously fair to Bethany and protective of the program's integrity, while knowing that these two objectives might not always align. The final escalation came when Bethany's squad leader during a tactical exercise reported an incident that crystallized all the concerns about her approach. During a simulated hostage rescue scenario, Bethany had questioned the mission parameters, suggesting alternative approaches that might reduce civilian casualties. While her tactical thinking was sound, her willingness to challenge established procedures during a training exercise raised red flags about her ability to follow orders during actual operations. "She's not just thinking outside the box," the squad leader reported. "She's questioning whether the box should exist at all. That might be valuable in a think tank, but it's dangerous in special operations where hesitation can get people killed." The incident was recorded in her file as evidence of potential command authority issues, marking the beginning of a paper trail that could justify her eventual elimination from the program.
The crisis arrived at 04:30 hours on a Wednesday morning, during the final week of preparatory training, just days before Hell Week was scheduled to begin. Master Chief Rodriguez received an urgent call from Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters that would test everything the SEAL training program claimed to represent. A real-world situation had developed that required immediate response from available personnel, and conventional forces were too far away to respond in time. A civilian research vessel conducting oceanographic studies had encountered severe mechanical failure 40 nautical miles off the coast of San Diego. The ship was taking on water rapidly, and its crew of 6 scientists and 2 maritime personnel faced imminent danger in rough seas that prevented standard Coast Guard rescue operations. The vessel's sophisticated research equipment and classified sonar mapping technology made it a high-priority recovery situation that required specialized underwater capabilities. What made the situation particularly challenging was the vessel's location in an underwater canyon system that created treacherous currents and limited visibility. The water temperature was 52 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause rapid hypothermia in anyone without proper thermal protection. The rescue would require not just exceptional swimming ability, but also technical diving skills, cold water survival expertise, and the kind of decision-making under pressure that separated elite operators from conventional rescue personnel. Lieutenant Commander Hayes reviewed the available options with increasing frustration. The nearest SEAL team was deployed overseas, and the second closest unit was conducting training exercises in Virginia that couldn't be interrupted without compromising national security objectives. The Coast Guard had attempted helicopter rescue, but had been forced back by deteriorating weather conditions that made hovering over the disabled vessel impossible. Time was running out, and conventional rescue approaches weren't adequate for the technical demands of the situation. "We need someone with advanced dive capabilities who can operate effectively in cold water conditions," Rodriguez explained to his assembled staff. The civilian crew doesn't have survival suits, and the water temperature means we have maybe 90 minutes before hypothermia becomes fatal. This isn't a standard rescue. It requires someone who can think tactically while managing multiple technical challenges simultaneously. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Here was a real-world crisis that demanded exactly the kind of analytical thinking, cold water expertise, and multidimensional problem-solving that the instructors had been criticizing in Bethany's approach to training. The mission required someone who could analyze complex variables, adapt to changing conditions, and execute technical procedures under extreme stress, capabilities that were more cognitive than purely physical. Dr. Chen reviewed the physiological requirements for the mission with growing realization of its implications. Successful completion would require someone who can maintain cognitive function while experiencing significant cold stress, navigate complex underwater terrain while managing emergency equipment, and coordinate with surface support while dealing with communication challenges. The successful operator would need to think clearly under conditions that typically impair decision-making ability. Instructor Williams found himself in the uncomfortable position of acknowledging that the mission parameters didn't align with traditional SEAL training priorities. This isn't about pure physical dominance or unquestioning obedience to commands, he admitted reluctantly. Success would depend on someone who can analyze the situation dynamically and adapt their approach based on real-time conditions. The operator would need to make independent decisions about technical procedures while maintaining focus on the overall mission objective. The crisis deepened when initial reconnaissance revealed that the research vessel was equipped with experimental underwater communication systems that required specialized knowledge to operate effectively. The rescue wouldn't just be about extracting personnel, it would involve preserving critical technology and potentially retrieving classified research data that couldn't be allowed to fall into foreign hands if the vessel was lost. Master Chief Rodriguez faced a decision that challenged fundamental assumptions about SEAL capabilities and training effectiveness. The mission required skills that went beyond traditional special operations parameters, demanding someone who could integrate technical knowledge, environmental adaptation, and strategic thinking while operating independently in life-threatening conditions. It was exactly the kind of complex, multifaceted challenge that modern special operations increasingly faced, but it wasn't the kind of mission that traditional SEAL training had been designed to address. The final complication came when weather reports indicated that conditions were deteriorating rapidly. The rescue window was closing, and any delay would likely result in mission failure and loss of life. Command needed to commit resources immediately, but the only personnel available were trainee candidates who hadn't yet proven themselves capable of handling real-world special operations demands. The decision would have to be made based on potential rather than proven performance, creating a test that no training scenario could replicate.
The emergency briefing convened at 0500 hours in the main conference room, with every available instructor and candidate present. Master Chief Rodriguez stood before the assembled group, his weathered face reflecting the gravity of the situation as he outlined the mission parameters. The research vessel's condition had deteriorated further, and satellite imagery showed that the crew had been forced to abandon the lower decks as water continued flooding the ship's hull. "This is not a training exercise," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the weight of command authority. "We have 8 civilian lives at risk, along with sensitive research equipment that cannot be allowed to fall into unauthorized hands. The mission requires immediate deployment of someone with advanced diving capabilities, cold water survival expertise, and the ability to operate independently under extreme conditions." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. This was exactly the kind of real-world situation that SEAL training was designed to prepare operators for, but none of the candidates had completed the program yet. The instructors would have to select someone based on demonstrated potential rather than proven capability, making a decision that could determine both mission success and human survival. Instructor Williams reviewed the candidate roster with visible reluctance. Most of the male candidates possessed strong swimming abilities and had demonstrated physical resilience during training, but the mission's technical requirements went beyond basic water survival skills. The successful operator would need to manage complex diving equipment, navigate underwater obstacles, and coordinate technical recovery procedures while dealing with hypothermic stress that impaired cognitive function. Morrison has strong water skills, Williams noted, referring to a former collegiate swimmer who had excelled in aquatic training exercises, but he struggled with equipment management under pressure, and this mission requires simultaneous handling of multiple technical systems. Other candidates were eliminated for similar reasons, strong in some areas, but lacking the comprehensive skill set that the mission demanded. The discussion continued for several minutes as instructors weighed options that all seemed inadequate. Each candidate possessed some of the required capabilities, but none demonstrated the complete combination of technical knowledge, environmental adaptation, and analytical thinking that the mission required. The rescue was becoming increasingly urgent, and command needed to make a decision based on incomplete information about untested personnel. Dr. Chen raised the physiological considerations that complicated the selection process further. Cold water operations create cognitive impairment that affects decision-making ability. The successful operator needs someone who can maintain analytical thinking while experiencing significant physical stress. Most people lose the ability to process complex information effectively when dealing with hypothermic conditions. It was at this moment that Bethany stepped forward, her voice clear despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Sir, I volunteer for the mission." The room erupted in surprised murmurs as every eye turned toward her. Her fellow candidates exchanged glances that mixed disbelief with something approaching respect for her audacity in volunteering for a mission that seasoned instructors were struggling to staff adequately. Master Chief Rodriguez studied her with an expression that revealed his internal conflict. "Garcia, this is a real-world operation with lives at stake. It's not an opportunity to prove yourself during training. The mission requires capabilities that we haven't had the chance to fully evaluate in any of our candidates." His tone wasn't dismissive, but it carried the weight of responsibility for both mission success and personnel safety. "Sir, I understand the requirements," Bethany replied steadily. "I have technical diving certification, cold water survival training, and experience with underwater navigation systems. My preparation for SEAL training included extensive work with the equipment types used on research vessels, and my intelligence background has given me familiarity with the communication systems that need to be preserved during the recovery operation." The instructors exchanged glances that revealed their surprise at the comprehensiveness of her preparation. Williams leaned forward, his skepticism evident. "Garcia, this is not about preparation or qualifications on paper. This is about executing under pressure when people's lives depend on your performance. Are you certain you can handle that level of responsibility?" Bethany's response was immediate and unwavering. "Sir, I've been preparing for exactly this kind of situation for over a year. I understand the risks, I have the necessary skills, and I'm ready to execute the mission successfully. The question isn't whether I can handle the responsibility. The question is whether you're willing to let me try when conventional options have been exhausted." The room fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over everyone present. Rodriguez faced a choice that would test everything the SEAL program claimed to represent about identifying and utilizing human potential under extreme circumstances. He could continue searching for alternatives that might not exist, or he could trust in the preparation and determination of someone who had volunteered to risk everything for the sake of people she had never met. The decision came down to simple mathematics and desperate necessity. With weather conditions deteriorating rapidly and no other qualified personnel available, Master Chief Rodriguez made the call that would change everything. Garcia, you're authorized for mission deployment. Report to equipment staging immediately for gear fitting and final briefing. The words carried the weight of both opportunity and enormous responsibility as Bethany nodded sharply and moved toward the preparation area. The next 30 minutes unfolded with the precise choreography of military efficiency. Bethany was fitted with an advanced diving suit designed for cold water operations, equipped with underwater communication systems, and briefed on the specific technical requirements for preserving the research vessel's sensitive equipment. Her preparation during the past 18 months had included studying exactly these types of systems, and she moved through the equipment check with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed every procedure countless times. The helicopter flight to the rescue site took 18 minutes through increasingly turbulent weather conditions. Bethany used the time to review technical schematics of the research vessel and coordinate with the Coast Guard units that would provide surface support during the operation. Her analytical approach, which had been criticized during training as overthinking, now proved invaluable as she processed complex information about water conditions, equipment specifications, and emergency protocols. As the aircraft approached the rescue coordinates, the full scope of the challenge became visible. The research vessel was listing heavily to starboard, with waves crashing over the lower decks as the crew huddled on the remaining dry sections of the ship. The water around the vessel was a churning mass of white caps and debris, with visibility reduced to less than 50 feet due to spray and deteriorating light conditions. "Garcia, you have visual on the target," came the voice of the helicopter pilot through her headset. "Water temperature is holding at 52 degrees. Current is running northeast at approximately 4 knots. The vessel's crew is gathered on the forward deck, but they're reporting that the ship's stability is compromising rapidly. You've got maybe 45 minutes before the angle of list makes personnel extraction impossible." Bethany acknowledged the briefing and performed her final equipment checks. The diving gear felt familiar despite the high-stakes context. Her months of preparation had included extensive practice with identical systems. The underwater navigation equipment was configured exactly as she had studied, and the emergency communication protocols matched the procedure she had memorized. Every technical aspect of the mission aligned with capabilities she had developed through dedicated preparation that others had dismissed as excessive. The descent into the frigid Pacific water was a shock despite her cold water conditioning. The 52-degree temperature immediately began the physiological cascade that would challenge her cognitive abilities throughout the mission. But Bethany had trained extensively for exactly these conditions, practicing complex problem-solving tasks while experiencing controlled hypothermia. Her body's adaptation to cold stress gave her crucial additional minutes of clear thinking that untrained personnel wouldn't possess. Swimming toward the disabled vessel required navigating debris fields and managing equipment while fighting currents that threatened to sweep her away from the target. Bethany's navigation skills, honed through countless hours of practice, allowed her to maintain course toward the research ship while monitoring multiple technical systems simultaneously. Her analytical training enabled her to process information about water conditions, equipment status, and emergency protocols without becoming overwhelmed by the complexity. Reaching the vessel revealed the full scope of the technical challenge. The research ship was equipped with experimental sonar systems that required specialized shutdown procedures to prevent damage during extraction. The crew had been unable to complete these procedures before abandoning the lower decks, leaving critical equipment vulnerable to water damage that could compromise classified research data. Bethany would need to complete technical operations that the ship's own crew hadn't been able to finish. Working underwater beneath the listing vessel tested every aspect of her preparation. The cold water was affecting her fine motor control, making the precise manipulations required for equipment shutdown increasingly difficult. But her practice with hypothermic stress training allowed her to compensate for the physiological impairment, using techniques she had developed specifically for maintaining technical proficiency under extreme conditions. The equipment recovery phase required her to coordinate with surface support while managing multiple technical systems simultaneously. Bethany's multilingual abilities proved unexpectedly valuable when she discovered that some of the research equipment included interface instructions in Spanish, allowing her to navigate system menus that might have stymied other operators. Her European educational background, dismissed as irrelevant by training instructors, provided practical advantages in the real-world operational context. As she worked to complete the technical aspects of the mission, she could hear radio chatter indicating that the civilian crew was becoming increasingly panicked about their deteriorating situation. The ship's list was increasing, and the remaining dry deck space was shrinking rapidly. Success would require her to complete equipment preservation procedures and coordinate personnel extraction within an extremely narrow time window that was closing with each passing minute.
The moment of truth came as Bethany surfaced near the research vessel's stern, having successfully completed the underwater equipment shutdown procedures that preserved millions of dollars worth of classified technology. Her communication with the helicopter support team was clear and professional despite 40 minutes of cold water exposure that should have significantly impaired her cognitive function. The intensive preparation that instructors had criticized as overthinking was now proving to be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "Base, this is Garcia." Her voice came through the radio with remarkable clarity. "Technical equipment preservation is complete. All classified systems have been properly shut down and secured. Beginning personnel extraction coordination now." The professional competence in her transmission surprised everyone monitoring the operation, including the instructors who had questioned whether she possessed the psychological resilience for real-world operations. The personnel extraction phase demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond what anyone had anticipated from a candidate who hadn't yet completed SEAL training. Bethany coordinated with the helicopter crew to establish a rescue basket system that could safely extract the civilian researchers despite the vessel's unstable condition and deteriorating weather. Her ability to manage multiple communication channels while directing complex operations revealed leadership skills that had been overlooked during training assessments. Working with the panicked civilian crew required exactly the kind of emotional intelligence that had been viewed as a weakness during her evaluations. Rather than the aggressive leadership style typical of special operations, Bethany used calm reassurance and clear communication to guide frightened researchers through unfamiliar rescue procedures. Her European background, which had seemed like a cultural barrier during training, actually provided advantages in working with the international research team that included non-English-speaking scientists. "Dr. Petrov, I need you to secure your research materials in the waterproof container," Bethany instructed in accented but clear English, having identified that the lead researcher was more comfortable with formal communication protocols. "The helicopter will extract you first, then will recover your colleagues in order of their position relative to the rescue point." Her systematic approach to the evacuation revealed tactical thinking that impressed even the experienced helicopter crew coordinating the operation. The most challenging extraction involved a research assistant who had suffered a leg injury when the vessel initially listed, making standard rescue basket procedures impossible. Bethany improvised a technical solution using diving equipment and emergency medical supplies, demonstrating the kind of creative problem-solving under pressure that special operations valued above all other capabilities. Her months of studying emergency medical procedures, dismissed as academic excess by her instructors, provided practical knowledge that saved both time and potentially a life. As the final civilian was lifted to safety, Bethany remained in the water to coordinate the recovery of sensitive research materials that couldn't be allowed to sink with the vessel. This phase of the operation required her to work alone in increasingly dangerous conditions, managing technical equipment while the research ship's stability deteriorated further. Her ability to maintain focus and execute complex procedures while isolated demonstrated exactly the kind of independent capability that SEAL operations required. The technical equipment recovery revealed the full scope of Bethany's preparation in ways that stunned the monitoring command staff. She navigated the research ship's systems with the competence of someone who had spent months studying their operation, quickly identifying and preserving the most critical data storage devices while prioritizing materials based on their classification levels. Her intelligence background provided operational knowledge that pure physical training could never replicate. Radio transmissions from the operations site painted a picture of professional competence that challenged every assumption the instructors had made about Bethany's operational capabilities.
Command, this is Rescue Leader. Bethany is demonstrating exceptional technical proficiency. She's managing multiple complex systems simultaneously while maintaining clear communication protocols. Her performance under pressure is outstanding. The final phase of the mission required Bethany to coordinate her own extraction while ensuring that all sensitive materials were properly secured for transport. This demanded the kind of strategic thinking that balanced personal safety with mission objectives, exactly the kind of decision-making that separated elite operators from conventional personnel. Her ability to manage these competing priorities while experiencing significant cold stress proved that her analytical approach was an operational asset rather than a training liability. As the helicopter lifted away from the rescue site with all personnel and materials safely recovered, the research vessel finally succumbed to its damage and slipped beneath the Pacific waves. The timing had been perfect. Any delay would have resulted in mission failure and potential loss of life. Bethany's performance had not only succeeded, but had done so with margins that impressed even veteran special operations personnel who had initially doubted her capabilities. The flight back to base was filled with radio chatter that revealed a fundamental shift in how everyone involved viewed Bethany's potential as a special operations candidate. Command, this is Rescue Leader. Bethany's performance exceeded all expectations. She demonstrated technical proficiency, leadership under pressure, and strategic decision-making that would be impressive for a seasoned operator, let alone a training candidate. Master Chief Rodriguez's response came through the radio with a tone that reflected his own surprise at the mission's outcome. Copy that, Rescue Leader. Garcia, outstanding work. Report to debrief immediately upon landing. The words carried weight that went far beyond simple mission acknowledgement. They represented recognition that everything the instructors thought they knew about Bethany's capabilities had been fundamentally wrong.
The debriefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command buzzed with an energy that Bethany had never experienced before. Instead of the skeptical faces and measured tones that had characterized her previous evaluations, she found herself surrounded by personnel who looked at her with something approaching professional respect. The successful rescue mission had created a fundamental shift in how her capabilities were perceived, but she understood that real institutional change would require more than a single successful operation. Master Chief Rodriguez began the formal debriefing with an acknowledgement that surprised everyone in the room. Garcia, your performance during today's operation exceeded all expectations and demonstrated capabilities that we failed to recognize during standard evaluation processes. Your technical proficiency, decision-making under pressure, and mission execution were exemplary by any measure. The words carried weight because they came from someone who had spent decades evaluating special operations personnel. However, the institutional implications of Bethany's success created complications that went beyond simple recognition of individual achievement. Lieutenant Commander Hayes addressed the broader concerns with diplomatic precision. While Garcia's operational performance was outstanding, we need to address the fact that our standard evaluation protocols failed to identify these capabilities during routine training assessments. This raises questions about our ability to accurately assess non-traditional candidates. Dr. Chen's psychological evaluation revealed the most significant challenge to existing training methodologies. Garcia's success contradicts fundamental assumptions about the relationship between emotional processing and operational effectiveness, she explained to the assembled officers. Her ability to maintain analytical thinking while managing emotional stress suggests that our current psychological screening protocols may be eliminating candidates who could be highly effective in complex operational environments. The conversation that followed challenged decades of established wisdom about what made successful special operations personnel. Bethany's European approach to problem-solving, which had been viewed as incompatible with American military culture, had actually provided advantages in coordinating with international civilians and managing technical systems that required cultural sensitivity. Her analytical methodology, dismissed as overthinking, had enabled her to process complex information under stress more effectively than candidates trained in traditional suppression techniques. Instructor Williams found himself in the uncomfortable position of acknowledging that his professional judgment had been fundamentally flawed. "I was wrong about Garcia's capabilities," he admitted with visible difficulty. "I focused on characteristics that I thought predicted failure without recognizing strengths that actually predicted success." Her emotional intelligence and analytical approach weren't weaknesses, they were force multipliers that enhanced her operational effectiveness. The broader implications extended beyond Bethany's individual case to questions about how the SEAL program evaluated and developed talent. Master Chief Rodriguez outlined the systemic issues that her success had revealed. We've been selecting for a narrow definition of special operations capability that may not reflect the full spectrum of skills needed for modern missions. Garcia's success suggests that we need to expand our understanding of what makes an effective operator. The political dimensions of the situation added another layer of complexity to the consequences. Naval Special Warfare Command was under scrutiny regarding female integration into SEAL training, and Bethany's success provided powerful evidence that women could excel in roles previously considered exclusively male. However, her exceptional performance also highlighted how institutional bias had nearly eliminated someone who proved to be extraordinarily capable. Colonel Mitchell from Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters addressed the implications with characteristic directness. Garcia's success represents both vindication and indictment of our current systems. We successfully identified and utilized exceptional talent when circumstances demanded it, but we nearly eliminated that same talent through standard evaluation processes. This suggests that our screening methodologies may be fundamentally flawed. The most significant consequence was the recognition that Bethany's preparation methods had actually been superior to standard SEAL training protocols in several key areas. Her systematic study of technical systems, environmental conditions, and psychological stress management had produced capabilities that exceeded what traditional training provided. This raised uncomfortable questions about whether the program's methodology was optimized for developing the skills that modern operations actually required. The debriefing concluded with decisions that would reshape both Bethany's future and the broader training program. Garcia, effective immediately, you're being fast-tracked through remaining training phases with a focus on areas where you can continue developing your demonstrated strengths, Rodriguez announced. Additionally, you'll be working with our curriculum development team to integrate some of your preparation methodologies into standard training protocols. The consequences extended beyond recognition to responsibility. Bethany would now carry the burden of proving that her success wasn't an anomaly, that the institutional changes her performance had catalyzed would produce better operators rather than diluted standards. Her individual triumph had become a test case for fundamental changes in how elite military units identified, developed, and utilized human potential.
The transformation in how Bethany was perceived became evident during her first training session following the rescue mission. Where once she had been relegated to the periphery of group exercises, she now found herself at the center of tactical planning discussions. Her fellow candidates sought her input on technical problems and strategic challenges, recognizing that her analytical approach provided insights that complemented their more traditional military thinking. The institutional recognition came in forms both formal and informal. Master Chief Rodriguez announced during the weekly training briefing that Garcia's performance had redefined excellence in special operations execution, and that her mission success would be studied as a case example of effective problem-solving under extreme pressure. The announcement carried particular weight because it came from someone whose respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence rather than academic achievement. More significantly, the curriculum modifications that resulted from analyzing Bethany's preparation methods began transforming how all candidates approached SEAL training. Her systematic study techniques were integrated into required preparation protocols. Her cold water conditioning methods were adopted as standard procedures, and her technical equipment familiarization became mandatory for all candidates. The program that had once viewed her preparation as excessive now required similar preparation from everyone. Dr. Chen's psychological reevaluation revealed the full scope of how institutional bias had distorted assessments of Bethany's capabilities. Garcia's emotional intelligence, which we initially viewed as a potential liability, actually enhanced her operational effectiveness by enabling better communication with civilian personnel and more nuanced decision-making under stress. Our evaluation protocols were measuring the wrong psychological factors for predicting success in complex operational environments. The validation extended beyond academic recognition to practical operational opportunities.
Naval Special Warfare Command began developing specialized mission profiles that specifically utilized Bethany's unique combination of technical expertise, linguistic capabilities, and analytical problem-solving skills. Rather than forcing her to conform to traditional operator templates, the organization began designing roles that maximized her distinctive strengths. The most meaningful recognition came from the civilian researchers whose lives she had saved during the rescue mission. Dr. Petrov, the lead scientist from the research vessel, sent a detailed letter to Naval Command describing how Bethany's professional competence and cultural sensitivity had made the difference between successful evacuation and potential tragedy. The letter specifically noted her ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining calm communication with panicked personnel. Fellow candidates began approaching Bethany for guidance on preparation techniques and analytical methodologies that they had previously dismissed as academic overthinking. Morrison, the former collegiate swimmer who had been considered a stronger candidate for the rescue mission, acknowledged that Bethany's systematic approach had produced superior operational readiness. "I thought preparation was about physical conditioning," he admitted. "You showed us that preparation means understanding every aspect of what we might face." The vindication created ripple effects throughout the Naval Special Warfare community, as other training commands began re-evaluating their own assessment protocols. Bethany's success had demonstrated that exceptional operators might not fit traditional profiles, and that institutional bias could eliminate talent that would prove invaluable in real-world operations. Her case became a catalyst for broader discussions about diversity, capability assessment, and the evolution of special operations requirements. Lieutenant Commander Hayes formally acknowledged the institutional learning that Bethany's success had produced. "Garcia's performance has taught us that our definitions of special operations capability were too narrow for the complex operational environment we actually face. Modern missions require operators who can think analytically, communicate across cultural boundaries, and manage technical systems that didn't exist when our training protocols were developed." The technical innovations that resulted from studying Bethany's preparation methods began improving overall program effectiveness. Her systematic approach to equipment familiarization reduced training accidents. Her analytical methodology improved decision-making under stress, and her cultural preparation enhanced effectiveness in international operations. The individual excellence that had been dismissed as excessive became the foundation for program-wide improvements. Perhaps most importantly, Bethany's vindication opened pathways for future candidates who might not fit traditional special operations profiles. The institutional recognition that analytical thinking, emotional intelligence, and systematic preparation could be operational advantages rather than training liabilities created space for different approaches to developing elite military capability. Her success had proven that excellence came in forms that traditional evaluation methods might miss. The formal recognition culminated in an unprecedented decision by Naval Special Warfare Command to accelerate Bethany's progression through training phases while simultaneously utilizing her expertise to improve training methodologies for future candidates. She would complete SEAL training not just as a successful graduate, but as someone whose approach had fundamentally improved the program itself. 6 months after the rescue mission that changed everything, Bethany Garcia stood before a new class of SEAL candidates as a qualified instructor, her trident insignia reflecting the California sunshine that streamed through the training facility windows. The young woman who had once been dismissed as too emotional and analytical for special operations had not only completed SEAL training in record time, but had become the architect of revolutionary improvements to the program itself. The transformation was evident in every aspect of how Naval Special Warfare Command approached candidate evaluation and training. The systematic preparation methods that Bethany had pioneered were now standard requirements for all candidates. Her analytical frameworks for understanding mission complexity had become core curriculum elements. Most significantly, the program had evolved from selecting for a narrow definition of warrior capability to recognizing that modern special operations required diverse forms of excellence. The new training protocols reflected lessons learned from Bethany's success. Candidates were now required to demonstrate technical systems proficiency, cultural awareness, and analytical problem-solving capabilities alongside traditional physical and psychological resilience. The program that had once viewed intellectual preparation as potential weakness now recognized that superior preparation was the foundation of superior performance under pressure. Bethany's role as an instructor allowed her to identify and develop other non-traditional candidates who might have been eliminated under previous evaluation systems. Her European perspective and analytical approach provided insights that helped candidates from diverse backgrounds succeed in an environment that had historically favored a single model of military excellence. She became an advocate for potential that others might overlook. The operational impact of these changes extended far beyond training improvements. SEAL teams began requesting Bethany for missions requiring technical expertise, cultural sensitivity, or complex problem-solving under pressure. Her success had created demand for operators with similar capabilities, leading to the development of specialized tracks within SEAL training that prepared personnel for the full spectrum of modern special operations requirements. The rescue mission that had proven her capabilities became a case study taught throughout Naval Special Warfare Command and other elite military units. The operation demonstrated how analytical thinking, systematic preparation, and cultural intelligence could enhance rather than compromise operational effectiveness. Bethany's approach had proven that there were multiple pathways to special operations excellence. Her influence extended beyond the immediate SEAL community to broader discussions about military capability and institutional bias. Defense Department officials studied her case as an example of how traditional evaluation methods might eliminate exceptional talent, leading to reforms in assessment protocols across multiple military specialties. Her individual success had catalyzed systemic improvements that would benefit countless future personnel. The personal transformation was equally significant. The young woman who had once fought for recognition had become someone whose expertise was actively sought by commanders planning the most challenging operations. Her European emotional intelligence, which had been viewed as incompatible with American military culture, was now recognized as an operational asset that enhanced team effectiveness and mission success. The legacy continued through the candidates she trained and mentored. Each new class included personnel who approached special operations from an analytical, cultural, or technical perspectives that complemented traditional warrior capabilities. Bethany's success had demonstrated that elite military units could be strengthened rather than diluted by embracing different forms of excellence. As she addressed the newest group of candidates, Bethany reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed outsider to respected instructor. Excellence isn't about conforming to established templates, she told them. It's about bringing your unique strengths to challenges that require every capability we can develop. The mission doesn't care whether your approach fits traditional expectations, it only cares whether you can execute successfully when lives depend on your performance. The sunny California morning that had once witnessed doubt and dismissal now showcased a transformed institution that recognized talent in all its forms. Bethany Garcia had not only completed SEAL training in record time, she had redefined what it meant to be an elite operator in an era that demanded excellence beyond traditional boundaries. Her story had become proof that institutional limitations were often more restrictive than actual human potential, and that exceptional achievement could emerge from the most unexpected sources when preparation met opportunity. The woman they said would never make the grade had not only exceeded every standard, but had raised those standards for everyone who would follow. The training facility bustled with activity as a new generation of candidates began their journey toward becoming SEALs, guided by protocols that Bethany had helped create and inspired by possibilities that her success had revealed. Her transformation from overlooked outsider to respected instructor had become evidence that the phrase "never make the grade" was simply a limitation waiting to be exceeded by someone willing to prove it wrong.